Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. The Point of View on CCTV. We pick the right topics, we get the right guests, ask them the relevant questions on issues that matter to you. Tonight, it's a mini debate on the state of Ghana's economy, our latest dalliance with the IMF, and what the prospects are for economic transformation. I've picked two men I respect a lot who are bringing to the discussion very important insights from private sector, the financial investment sector, and also politics. They'll be telling us how Ghana can navigate the labyrinth of a 17th IMF program successfully so we don't get back to square one again. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So tonight we're asking, how does Ghana navigate its latest dance with the IMF? The country is in the middle of a debt-induced fiscal crisis, which could possibly land us in a full-blown economic crisis. We started from a point of Ghana beyond aid to now Ghana desperate to get a deal from the IMF. Officials of Ghana were in China and in Washington trying to negotiate a deal on our debts. Tonight we've brought in studio two thinkers to help us understand how serious a situation we are is and how to get out. In studio I have Michael Harry Yamson, senior partner for Ishmael Yamson and Associates. He's also a leading management consultant and he's worked in many faculties in Ghana, Africa and the world. Michael, good to have you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I'll tell the world more about your profile as the program proceeds. We also have joining us Robert Ahunka Lindsay, entrepreneur, investment and finance specialist, current CEO of Lindsay Capital, but also importantly, former Deputy Minister of Trade, former CEO of GIPC. Robert, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, and good evening to my fellow guests and to your listeners.
Wonderful. I need to say that both of my guests have very rich experience in the private sector. Michael was head of marketing at Unilever Francophone West Africa. He launched Gateway Broadcast Services in Ghana as general manager before proceeding to head country investments for MTI Ghana. He's worked for many companies. So Michael, you are here both from your corporate capacity, but also a member of the NDC.
Yes.
Wonderful. And Robert also worked in many capacities, including Coca-Cola, globally done things with Bretton Woods institutions, and a member of the NPP. So Robert, it's good to have you. Now viewers,
thank you.
I have four main questions for my guests, but the questions I'll let you know. So why has Ghana repeatedly been going to the IMF? You know, what is the cause of all of this? Second question will be, is there an alternative to this resorting to the IMF, right? So, or is IMF inevitable? Then, if IMF gives us the money and the deal, what will it actually do for us? All right? And then, very importantly, what is your proposed economic model for Ghana? So those are my four questions. But I want to start with a general bonus question. How bad is the situation we're in? Let me start with Michael because you're here. I mean, how bad is where we are now?
I think where we are is very bad. And it is very bad because of the one word that we are all now throwing around, debt. Essentially, we have lost control of our debt. And it is unlike any other time when we have hit a crisis. This time round, we are literally having to restructure. It is not a case of some injection to support us to do things. We are literally broke. That is how bad it is. This afternoon, I engaged in a conversation with someone who said, but America also owes. And I had to remind the person, America owes in its own currency. It can print when it needs to print with far less consequences than if we attempt and have done printing 55 billion. America also invest in productivity. There's precious little conversation in Ghana about investing in productivity. So what happens, or what is happening now, is that we are in a debt that we don't have the tools to get out of unaided. What makes it, for me, terrifying is that we are about to take help, and let me call that the new wine, and pour it into the old wineskin.
Wow.
Because we have changed nothing. We have changed nothing about the political consensus that drives and manages this economy. We've changed nothing about the structure of the economy. We continue to apply tax in huge doses of regressive options. And we keep out a huge chunk of the economy from being contributors. We call it the informal sector. And all the different parts of politics almost excuse the informal sector from contributing. And I'm talking about through taxation. So we continue to have a very narrow, very deep tax net that simply frustrates anybody who wants to be a player in the economy. Ultimately, you are frozen out by a very unfriendly economy. And don't forget that magic word, corruption. We can't seem to shake corruption. Since 2000, when our numbers began to improve, we now hit 2014, 2015, and then we are stuck. We can't improve the environment. The perception of corruption remains stubbornly high, and you have to ask yourself, who wants to live, work, and play in a corrupt economy?
So
Not
things
any
are
serious
pretty
person.
bad,
Very bad.
and you don't see the program changing much because it's like new wine in old wineskins.
Exactly.
Let me take Robert's initial thoughts on how bad the situation is. Robert, so
Yes.
what's your context? How bad is the Ghana economic situation?
So let me maybe start off by saying that yes, we are in crisis. There is no doubt. We have a problem. But this is not a problem beyond reach or beyond management. What is the size of the problem? And I come at this from this element. We are in a problem because we've gotten a situation where we are not able to go forward without getting the confidence that comes with an IMF program to engage further with our creditors. So the challenge we have is, to me, not so much the magnitude, because when we look at everything we talk about $3 billion. This is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. In a country like Ghana with 30 plus million people, with their future, with what we can do, that what we have is a crisis associated with inability to raise money.
No.
So there is no doubt that we are in a crisis. And when you're in a crisis, you must face it and deal with it. But I am not a doomsdayer. I don't come from the school that says that we are doomed. We're far from it. You know, there are countries which were in a worse situation than we are, and today are flourishing. Japan, after the Second World War, what is its knees? Today, it is the second or third largest economy in the world. We have countries like South Korea, which had nothing in times where they were on their knees and have come forward. So, yes, we are in a crisis. But let us put that crisis in context. I'm not talking about solution yet. I've not started talking about whether we should change our structures of the economy. We'll come to that. But I think let us not talk ourselves further down the hole that we need to be in, because we will come out of that hole, because there will be Ghana there for our children and grandchildren. So we are in a crisis that we have made, that has been contributed by other factors, but it's a crisis that we have the capacity to manage ourselves out of.
Fair enough. Let's come to the first question. I'll start with Michael again. Why does this keep happening? Because if you look at our economy from at least when we became independent, even prior to that, it's almost like every 4 or 5 years, something like this happens. So you have to admit that this is a cyclical issue. irrespective of the magnitude. Why does this keep happening? Is it our leaders don't understand the world, the way the world works? Is it that the world system is set against us and therefore we can't come out? Is it witchcraft? Some forces in the other world keeping us bound? What are top reasons why this keeps happening?
Well, let me say this. You know, we went through decades where we blamed our inability to grow on political instability.
Yeah.
And I still maintain that we have political instability. Everybody says Ghana has political stability in West Africa. I think we have political instability. And let me describe it. I think the instability we have now is about inconsistency. We have baked into our constitution a mechanism that says every time a president takes office, he is at liberty to jettison everything and anything, start us off from zero all over again. It's not good. It bakes in instability. Our political system also refuses, almost with pride, to think together and say there are some red lines in Ghana. I talked about the informal sector. It shall shoulder its fair share. Tax shall not be regressive. These are understandings that ought to cut across political lines. You go to Europe. Europe is going through an energy transition. It doesn't matter whether it's the Greens in power in Germany or the Socialists in power in Portugal. They will execute an energy transition. That is what gets economies flourishing. So we have baked in political instability. We think that changing power every 4 years means stability. It does not. So let's get that one agreed. The second issue is corruption, and that simple fact that nobody in power is accountable. You cover it as a journalist and you see it all the time. So if we are forgiving and we wink at corruption and we protect and make people unaccountable and we say, oh, they are not high enough in the system to warrant attention, we are not going to make progress. The third thing is, for me, that simple thing about two parts of an economy that don't trust each other, the public and the private. They don't trust each other. They don't talk together. They don't set big targets. Why is it that in 1961, our president could say, I'm going to give targets to the private sector to deliver? And today, no politician is comfortable to say, I'm having a roundtable with the private sector, and I'm going to give them targets, and they are going to deliver, and I'm going to give them space to do it, and then they are going to, in turn, power the public purse. It's not a freebie. I will give you space, but in return, you will fund the public purse. It's an understanding that we need to get to. But today, that space just does not exist. Then you have this horrible, defective economic model that we have. We continue to sit at the periphery of trade. We have low-tech economy. It's not diversified. The private sector is weak. Infrastructure is just not there, and we are completely dependent on primary commodities and importing.
So you give me 4 factors: instability, which is inbuilt, corruption, public-private sector disconnect, and then a defective economic model.
But around all that, you have this fallacy that if we get debt forgiveness, as has happened before, suddenly we have room to borrow. That is when we should be saying to ourselves, let us invest the space that we have gained in productivity. But like I said, in Ghana, productivity is an evil word. The minute you raise it, all hell breaks loose. But we have to understand that it's not about space to go and borrow more. It is about taking the advantage to now sit back and say, how do we make sure that next time we are powering our own growth? We cannot aim to grow through debt. We must aim to grow through productivity. And that word is missing in the political dialogue. It's missing in the public sector. It is missing in the private sector. It is missing in our trade. It is literally not something that we wake up to as a country and say, today we shall be better than we were yesterday.
So your 5th point is an economic model that abhors productivity.
Thank you.
Robert, what are your top 3 or 4 or 5 reasons?
Thank you for that. There are some points they made that I agree with, actually, in terms of the public-private sector. But let me go to the area. One of the first points I want to make, and you made the point very clearly, that this is not our first time. We are going the 17th time. Do you know when the first time we went to IMF was? Is
63.
after Freeman Nkrumah was overthrown, and he
66.
was in economic difficulty because cocoa prices dropped through the floor and he could not fund his economic development plan. He said no to the IMF preconditions, and a few days later there was a coup d'etat and we went to the IMF. One of the key areas why we are where we are is because of our complete reliance, what I will call, on market forces. When I say market forces, the example I gave is cocoa. And please put all the slides up because we won't have time to go through them. We're just going to just put them on. I'm talking about the 4th point here. The
Market forces, gold, cocoa, oil, and war.
Gold. So when there's a shock in cocoa, we are in trouble. When there's a shock in gold, we are in trouble. When there's a shock in oil, we are in trouble. When there's war, and I'm not talking just about Ukraine, I'm talking about any mishap, 70s, issues that happen, we are in trouble. That is one of the key areas.
Market forces.
The first point I want to make is naivety, and I want to talk about this very clearly. You know, over the 60 plus years of independence, I think some of our policy makers have been, and let me put myself in that bracket, we have been naive in our understanding of both the world we live in and thinking that people are there to help us. And we should realize that, as Margaret Thatcher said, charity begins at home. And also, we've been a little naive in our ability to engage in certain activities. So we make some plans, which I wonder sometimes if those plans were designed for Ghana or for another country, given who we are. The other point I want to mention is political interference, both domestic and international. Again, we're looking over the 60 plus years. The number of times plans put in place that have the potential, please go to the next slide, to the next point, that have the potential to drive a change in our political and economic fortune have been, no, please go back. No, go back to the previous, that's it, just stay there. Have been interfered with both domestically in terms of people, Mr. Yamson has mentioned some of those in terms of politicking or whatever we may be doing in terms of fighting across aisles, rather than agreeing that there's some key areas to engage in. That has been a great area. The defunct economic model is one I want to expand a little bit more. Look, we have an economy where nearly 60 plus % of our economy is made up of the informal sector, a sector we can't measure, we can't touch. We can only engage in the most rudimentary economic mechanism. And that is a model that has hurt us, and a model we seem to enable to try and get around of. And when we go to Washington, or we go to New York, or we go to Beijing, or we go to wherever, they are working on a very different model. A developmental model is very different. And I think it's taken us a bit of time to get to grips with that. The second point I want to talk to romanticism. And this is, and I make this point very seriously. It seems every decade or so, we jump on the new bandwagon. Do you remember there was a time something called basic needs? Do you remember that? We had this whole world was about basic needs, and let's make sure that we have set this up. Now we're on, what do we call it? MDC, all the various development goals. We seem to jump every decade from one romantic notion of the solution to all our problems to another. And that is something that is designed for failure. A defunct era I've talked about. I want to talk a little bit about also the time of our development. This is very important. Many nations manage to go through a lot of this economic development that we're going through in an environment very different from ours. We talk often about how the North and aspects of the East and West have grown, but a lot of those times were done in an environment where we are not practicing what we practice, they call democracy, which we're all 100% behind. And so there are things they were able to do. Frankly, some of them are dictators. They could do what they wanted to do, in a manner that forced certain change. We use Singapore often as an example. Today, you can't do that. We work in a very different environment, so it requires a different approach, which we have not been smart enough to change.
Robert,
and then the last point,
Robert, you have about 8 points. I'm picking your top 4: market forces, political interference, a defunct economic model, and then you sort of mix the romanticism with the time of our development. I think those are strong enough points. I wanted to jump.
Can I just ask one more on that, which is our economic doctrine?
Okay, which is what?
So it's about whether we are right of center, left of center, whether we want to follow a north, a BRICS. We jump around. Economic doctrine is about what economic policy we should follow to address our economic challenges. And so often we get that confused. So maybe you will have a government that comes in and says that the private sector is the engine of growth. So they will start doing that. Another one will come in and create government as the big engine. That constant change over the past 60 years has meant we have very little that has lasted more than 5 years. Not linked to the fact the government has changed, but it's because we changed the very essence of what we think should be our model.
Fair enough. Let me move to the next question, and I'll start with you on this one. Is there a real alternative to resorting to the IMF? Or this IMF thing? I mean, look, if we didn't get the IMF deal, will the country collapse?
Well, I think the honest truth of this is the following. At this stage that we're in, we have no choice. Why? It's very simple. We have no choice. Please show the 3 bullet points there. We have no choice because we work, if you're playing football, Bernard, FIFA is the administrator. You can't decide today, I've decided I'm no longer going to play by the FIFA rules. They will throw you out of all the competition and you don't have anywhere to go. So at this stage, given that we work in an interlinked world, where you can't go to France and talk them alone, Germany and talk them alone, China and talk them alone, US and talk them alone, because they're a club. They're a club of creditors. So when you get to a situation where basically you don't have the ability to raise funds to pay what you've borrowed, you have no choice but to talk to them. And so at this stage, we have no choice. Before, we would have had limited choice, limited opportunity, because again, and please go to my third point, we are dealing here with club rules. We've borrowed from a group. That is why you have the Paris group there. And this was set up very intentionally to try and stop people interfering and nitpicking against one or the other. So the bottom line is that the alternative now, no.
No, I'll keep that. Let me ask Michael if he agrees. Is there an alternative to resorting to the IMF?
Certainly.
There is?
There is.
Yeah, even now?
Why are we there? And what are we seeking? We are there seeking $3 billion.
Yes.
And we are there because we've mismanaged our affairs.
Yes.
So the alternative is to manage your affairs well.
No, but I'm talking about the objective of where we are. Yeah. Like if you were to, I'm not talking about the ideal. I'm saying like now.
Bernard, since last year.
Yes.
We have been sitting with an understanding between government and private bondholders to address 83.5 billion of waste, of corruption, of revenue losses, revenue leakages. We've done nothing with that document that 2 parties worked on, signed off, and said, indeed, there's 83.5 billion to be addressed. We've won our suits, powdered our faces, and gone to Washington to go and chase 30
You're talking about the independent, the bondholders,
yes.
The
bondholders.
Yeah.
They've agreed 83.5 billion of savings.
But would that have been saved within the time you prepared the document?
What is the club looking for? The club, at the end of the day, is looking to make sure that we are responsible with our debt and we will pay it off. What stopped us from going there to say what we need is time? What we don't need is relief. We need time.
Really?
Yes.
We could have said we need time,
and
that if we implemented the 83 billion in cuts, we wouldn't have needed 3 billion.
Why do you need 30 billion in relief when you can do 83 billion by yourself?
It's actually even 3 billion.
Yes, $3 billion.
Yes, so 30 billion in cedis. So you're saying that the document you prepared, we could have saved the country 83 billion cedis.
Yes. We are chasing 30 billion.
Wow. So we could have told IMF we just need time.
We just need time.
And all the debtors,
And they will
the creditors would have
and
agreed.
they will respect you more. I need time. I don't need money. I need time.
Time to do what?
Because I have a plan to save 83 billion.
You're serious?
I'm dead serious.
I'll let Robert, a quick comment on that before we go for a break. You don't believe what he's saying?
I'm sorry, I disagree. Let me say I disagree. You see, this is one of our challenges. The question was this. Now, you are in crisis.
Yes.
We live in a global world. There's a club
Waiting
rule.
for the crisis to come.
It is not. I'm not talking about. You see, let us be honest with ourselves. The question is now. And you remember my second point is that if we had gone before, we would have limited. And let me explain why, so that we're very clear. The issue is being shut out of the global economic system. Now we don't have a choice because why? We have been downgraded. We cannot raise capital. We can't raise enough revenue. So at this time, the only thing you can do, we can debate whether we should have gone. If we should have gone.
Okay, so Robert, when you say before crisis, limited, yes, what do you mean?
Yes, exactly. Before crisis, if you go to the debtors, you still would have gone to ask them to ask for help. So you could not have said, I am going to do my own thing. Just give me time and I'll come to you. The world doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. I have sat on all sorts of boards. I have advised over 6 presidents on the economic basis policy, including the Bretton Woods Institution.
Yeah.
There is limited. We work in a situation where you have all these creditors. When you get to a situation where you are in trouble, you have to go, sit with them, and agree. That is the essence. The IMF is not just meant to be there for end of the road. It is part of a process to get yourself out of a situation. So to think that we could have sat there and just done the 83 bondholders and then gone to the Paris and the Chinese and say, just wait for this time. It just won't work. We'll take
a break. When we come back, I'll try and deal with this. Now, there's even a new question in my head now, whether the IMF is even part of the problem. But we will come back to this. This is the point of view. Tonight, we're debating pathways to Ghana's economic transformation. My guest, Robert Awonka-Lindsay, investment, entrepreneurship guy, former minister for trade deputy, and also now works at Lindsay Capital. Michael Harry-Yamson, senior partner, COO, Ismail Yamson and Associates, who are a leading management consultancy firm, worked many years in Unilever, GBS, and other areas. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Pepsodent introduces charcoal and lemon essence. The unique combination of natural essences whitens teeth naturally for you and family, because every smile matters. New Pepsodent Herbal. Introducing a unique combination of herbal extracts in an antibacterial toothpaste for strong teeth and healthy gums that protects your family and you. Every smile matters.
Africanacity is using plastic waste to provide affordable homes.
Welcome back. The point of view tonight is trying to understand pathways to Ghana's economic transformation as the country desperately pleads for an IMF program. My guest, Robert Awonka-Lindsay, former Deputy Minister of Trade, former GIPC boss, is joining us from London. And Michael Harry-Yamson, senior partner, COO, Ismail Yamson and Associates. Robert is of the MPP, Michael is of the NDC. The first question, I think they were at them in a way. How did we get here? They sort of yin-yang, right? Different sides of the same point. So there was no disagreement there. First disagreement, is there a real alternative to resorting to IMF? Robert says no, but a limited yes, probably earlier. Michael says no, you should have told IMF you need time. The $3 billion is not going to change much. Indeed, let me segue to my next question. And again, I'm going to start with you now. Because my next question was that what will the $3 billion IMF program do for us? Because when we get an ECF, it's $3 billion and some credibility. Okay. What will it do for us?
So that's the word, confidence, credibility. Everybody who will respond and say confidence and credibility knows that that $3 billion is coming to sit in a structure and a context that is just going to waste it. And that is the truth. So there is, I call it a mirage of confidence and a mirage of credibility. It's not real, because the very people giving us the $3 billion know that we have not done the political and economic reforms that will actually turn us around. So for me, the IMF is our friend in a way. 2018, they began to warn us, you are heading for a ditch. We didn't listen 2018, we didn't listen 2019, 2020, the whole world turned upside down. 2021, we began to turn around and we went hard for the ditch. And now we are deep in the ditch. So I don't blame IMF, but I still hold the view that if you were ruthlessly thinking about how you get on your own strength from 2018, you would not be here. Remember that the profile of our debt has also changed. We rushed for private money. Because in a way, IMF has already demonstrated that they themselves were not too keen. So we are there today looking for help, and they were warning us and warning us and warning us. So they shouldn't be a factor today. And to make them a non-factor does not take rocket science. The world has changed, yes, but we have a near region called West Africa. There are problems to be solved in West Africa. Ghana still has one of the best educated populations. We have some of the best infrastructure. Leverage that. Win here. You are trying to play against global behemoths and you are failing. So win with what you know you can compete. And when you have succeeded, use that as a stepping stone to go to the world.
Let me understand you. In a sense, you're saying the $3 billion wouldn't do anything for us, not because it's worthless, but because we will not do the necessary reform for the $3 billion. It's like a complicated way of answering the question. So the $3 billion can do something if you would do.
If we were ready to receive it for good purpose.
But how do you know we are not?
But what has changed?
In terms of what?
What has changed in the way the public sector soaks money? What's changing? Have any spending cuts been announced that you are aware of? Nothing. So if we get that relief, it will come to sit into a basket.
So you're saying the reform should come prior to the money, so that you know that the money will do something.
Or at the very least, we should know that this is going to come to give us that mirage of confidence, because that sort of change doesn't take 1 month, but at least we are committed to it. Look, the proudest thing we took to Washington was 3 tax incentives. But those 3 tax incentives, everybody knows, will have a chilling effect on the private sector in this country. So where will the growth come from to power the public purse so that the government will have room to go and do development?
So you don't think the $3 billion will do much?
Utter waste.
Robert, what would the $3 billion do for us?
Well, I think it's interesting. My answer to this, please show the slide of what I said what the $3 billion would do.
You said, I think you said it would buy us time.
No, it is time. That is all it's doing. Look, the question we're asking, we must make sure we don't mix. See, part of our challenge is that, when you're dissecting a problem and trying to find a solution to it, we must make sure that we have step by step addressed the challenges. I agree, 100%, that since independence, not since 2018, we have a structure of our economy that has led us 17 times to the IMF, and it will keep sending us to the IMF if we don't do something about it. There is no doubt about that. But the question is, what will the 3 billion do? Right now, we're in a crisis. We don't have money to pay our creditors. We need breathing room. Breathing room, time that allows us to start addressing some of those fundamental challenges that we know has existed for 60 plus years. That has led us to a situation where we have gone 17 times. You see,
but Robert, how do you solve a 60-year problem with $3 billion?
No, but that's not the question. Your question is relevant, but that is not the question asked, because that is the next question. Right now, if you are, let me give you another synopsis. You are drowning. Okay? You can't learn to swim in the time you are drowning. You need somebody to hold you, to allow you at least to keep your head above water, to breathe while you learn how to swim. What we need with the 3 billion is so we don't collapse. The money to me is actually not even relevant. The money itself in terms of 3 billion is a number. As I said earlier on, this is not a big number. What it does is exactly what Mr. Yamson said, but with the caveat. We need time from confidence for our creditors to give us the breathing room to have a dialogue as a country, to have a dialogue with the different political parties, to have a dialogue with civil society, to have a dialogue with the private sector and say, okay, do we want to repeat this cycle again?
Okay, Robert, hold on right there.
Yes.
Michael said we should have told the IMF that we want to have a conversation about our own restructuring. Give us time. And then you said, well, where we got into, we needed to go to IMF. Just hold on.
Yes.
But you're basically saying the same thing. You're saying, give me 3 billion so that the 3 billion will give me time. But Michael says, tell the IMF I need, no, hold on. He says, I need time because the 3 billion itself, if you look at the amount of money we owe, and in fact, the 3 billion is actually, you are going to borrow it, right? So you're already in debt in the billions. And you're going to borrow 3 more billion to give you time. Michael says, no, don't go and borrow more money. Tell the IMF I need time so that you can restructure to pay what I already owe. But you are going for 3 billion to get time. I mean, what's that?
So it's the sequencing. That is where we have a difference. Okay, first of all, the IMF is not the one, by the way, that is giving the loans. The lenders.
What are you doing?
So the IMF,
even take it, but what are you
Michael, if you are going to keep talking, it's going to be difficult for me.
Sorry, Michael, he thought he was whispering. He thought he was whispering. Sorry. Robert, go on. He thought he was whispering. Go on.
So the IMF doesn't give loans. The IMF gives loans that help you address a challenge.
Okay.
That is why the Minister of Finance has got to go and speak to a Paris club, has got to go and speak to China, has to speak with the bondholders in Ghana, has to speak with the pensioners. The IMF provides you a cloak that allows you to get yourself out of the doo-doo you've around yourself in. I'll give an example. In the US, when a company gets in trouble, it's something called Chapter 11. It allows you a little breathing room to get yourself together. The IMF gives Ghana a Chapter 11 to allow us to ask people to hold on while we fix the situation we're in. So it's a question of sequencing. That's why I said, when he asked me, could we have not have gone and the time we're in now? The answer is no, because we don't have the money to pay. When you ask, could we have gone earlier? My answer is yes, but limited, because you would still have been in a situation where your revenues would not have caught up your debt and your debt repayment, and you would still have had to sit down with your creditors to agree a reduction of payment profile. And so that is why it's limited, yes. Now,
let me ask another quick question. Yes. Is the IMF program not some guarantee to borrow more? Because you've lost credibility in the market, and therefore nobody's going to give you money. If the market hears you're going to get 3 billion, is that not some sort of, it's like a guarantee that, you know what, these guys are on a restructuring program, so lend them more money?
No.
Is that not
because, no, the creditors, eyes will be even wider open. What the IMF does is that we have basically, what the IMF programs does, and let us be honest with ourselves in where it is. The IMF comes and puts somebody in our I like the example that Margaret Thatcher used. You use the kitchen, but the IMF will say, gives confidence to those that are lending to us, is that they have put straitjackets on what we can't and cannot do over a period to ensure that we are sustainable. It is not just that we can then suddenly go out and borrow another 100 billion. It's not going to happen because nobody's going to give you the money. But it tells you that what the IMF program does is that it puts you in the straitjacket on certain expectations, and the word they use is debt sustainability. But bottom line, what it basically says is that you are able to meet your obligations from your income. That is what it's going to do. And it gives that over a period. While you are in that program, you are limited by that. That is why I'm saying it gives us time. But it in itself, it is not a solution. In itself, it is. That is why I do agree with Ishmael. In itself, it is not a solution.
You're referring to his father. You're referring to his father now.
Oh, sorry. I worked so close. My apologies. My sincere apologies, Michael, not Ishmael. Please call me Robert. My apologies for that. But that is why I'm agreeing with Michael that in itself, it is not the solution to the problem, but it gives you the time and the breathing room for us to have the debate amongst Ghanaians to say, do we want to repeat this 17-year cycle we've done for the next 60 years, or are we prepared to face the music and deal with the issues that keep sending us there?
I guess
that's what we need right now.
I'll give Michael the chance to rebut that, and then I'll ask the final question of the two of you, which is the question of your proposed economic model for Ghana. But I noticed you were speaking under your breath on what you were saying, so just a quick reaction to that.
I mean, there is a momentum that we have put ourselves into. So what I was saying was that, by all means, take the 3 billion. But exactly as Robert is saying, let us do the work of making sure that we very quickly come to that place where the political groupings in Parliament, the executive, talk to the private sector, and we do that, what I've been calling the root and branch reform of this very economy of ours. For me, as we sit here, and I will keep saying it, I think the institution that has failed us the most is Parliament in its oversight. It has given the executive too much room to just bring things that took us nowhere. Few days ago, I heard a senior member of the Finance Committee say, now when the executive brings laws for them to pass, to consider and pass, they will be very ruthless and rigorous in the review. And I asked myself, is that an admission? So, by all means, let's take the 3 billion. I mean, they are begging to give it to us anyway, so take it. But take it with a mind that says we are going to be very different boys and girls.
All right. We will come back and address what possibly is the most important question of the day. So, what is your proposed model for transformation? I think that's what many people want to hear. We'll be right back. My guests, Michael Harry-Amson and Robert Collins, stay with us.
Creamy Plus is a fully skimmed evaporated milk. Creamy Plus is available in a shop near you.
This message has been vetted and approved by the FDA. Finally, anyone can become a house owner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. YugoFlip, a real estate gaming platform that allows you to play and stand a chance of winning a house or cash or consolidated prizes, such as savings towards a house. Simple and easy to play. Visit www.yugoflip.com. Buy a ticket to enter the game. Wait for the end of the game to enjoy the win. Anyone can win. Flip it or own it. YugoFlip. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Play responsibly, not for persons below 18 years, and gaming can be addictive.
Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight, we're talking the economy, pathways to economic transformation, debating Ghana's latest dance with the IMF. Guests Michael Harry-Yamson of Ismail Yamson and Associates, and a member of the NDC, Robert Hamka-Lindsay, entrepreneur, former CEO of GIPC, former Deputy Minister, member of the MPP. Questions have been asked. What has led Ghana to successful years of failure? I think they're both in agreement. Is there a real alternative to resorting to the IMF? They disagree. What will the 3 billion do? You can say they're not agreeing. So what is your proposed economic model for Ghana? I'll start with you inside here. So 5 minutes. Give me your bullet points of the so if you're advising the president or whoever is in charge. You're an economic management team of whichever government. NDC. Mahama is in power. Right? And he's saying, Michael, what should be my top 3 priorities for economic transformation so that we don't keep going back to the IMF? So let's assume you win the election in 2024. You will be in an IMF program, right? So you are in the program. By saying, Michael and team, tell me 3 things I should do so that when this program is over, it will be the last.
Okay.
What would you say to him?
Last week I spoke at the IEA. I spoke about wealth creation. And it was a long conversation. But let me break it down.
Yeah.
I think that Ghana, like many other African countries, has spent the last 7 decades, shall I put it this way, chasing money. Let us produce some basic products, whether it's from the farm or breaking rocks or whatever. Let's export it. Raw. And we even allow receiving countries to then create laws that prevent us from adding value to what we have.
Oh, really?
You know you can't process cashew and send it to India. You know you can't sell certain grades of chocolate in Europe unless it was made there.
Really?
So we chase revenue. On the assumption that if we chase the money, we will have enough to develop our country, our people will get wealthy. And I asked the question, so if this was true, what has been going on in the last 70 years? It is not true. The countries in Asia, in the north, that recovered after World War II, that recovered after the 1970 shocks, that recovered after the shocks in the 90s, they did something very different. They moved their economies to higher value output. We too have to ask ourselves how we are going to do that and take back the power that we have. After all, the raw materials sit here. And by the way, the world is going to need us more to feed itself and to power technological development. Congo, the world depends on Congo, right? For rare earth metals. The world will depend on countries like Ghana, even for food. So we have to think. I wouldn't recommend 3 things, I recommend 2.
2 things.
2 things because these are 2 sectors that have the greatest capacity to employ the largest number of young people. You know, we're going to hit about...
And you have 2 minutes to give me those 2 things.
Okay. we're going to hit about 45 million.
Yeah.
We will have 10 million more young people looking for work. I will simply say that focus on your agribusiness. Add value to agriculture, right from the science of the seed and the soil to the branding and the market development for the final products.
So the science of the seed and the soil to
the final branded product that goes to the world.
So the whole value chain. Add value to the whole value chain of agriculture. So that's number one priority.
Don't just focus on producing more from the field.
I get it.
The second is that we have stories to tell in this country. We are storytelling people. We have our culture, our arts, and our tourism to invest in. We have seen it as an aside. And even when we've given it attention, we have thought of it as, oh, tourism, let's get more people to visit our castles. But I tell you, in the last few years, more people have come to Ghana to party and have fun. And we have made more money out of that. What are the stories that we have to tell? And in what formats are we going to tell them? Are we only going to tell them through Commission for Folklore? Are we going to tell them through blockbuster films, apps,
so whatever? The creative cultural economy and the narrative
is huge, and the agribusiness is so those
are the two things.
Those two value chains must be our all in all.
Wow.
And I would say then that when you have made that decision to focus, then all the investment must be on either innovating or developing markets. Nigeria began with crudely filmed movies. Today, Nollywood is massive. And indeed, South Korea began with very basic vehicles. Today, they are massive. And even in technology, look at what Samsung is doing.
So the icing on the cake will either be innovation or markets or both?
It's both. It has to be both. And finally, let me say this. We've talked about changing the structure, changing the consensus. We have to now have a new consensus about what our leadership values are going to be, what our leadership attitudes and mindset is going to be, and what behaviors we are going to reward. If we leave that out, it will just be money spent without any
I have 5 minutes. Let me give all to Robert. Thank you, Michael. Robert, you have 5 minutes. What is your economic model? You can borrow from his own and add to it. You don't have to repeat.
Okay, I will not repeat. Let me go through that. Yes, wealth is better than poverty alleviation. Nobody likes being less poor, but they do like to have wealth. I agree with that. Can we put my slides up and let me pick the three from there, please? Put them all up. The first one I would say in making sure we go forward in Ghana is the following. And I want to pick the fourth bullet point there. Just go to the fourth. And I've put these things. I said restructure, refocus, and reassign in these three key areas. Government, civil society, and the private sector. Because if we don't fix those three in terms of refocusing, restructuring, reassigning ourselves, we will be back to number 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, etc. And our children will never forgive us. That's the first one I want to put. The second one I want to say is the fifth point, which is what I call industrial-led transformation. Agribusiness, let me say so about agribusiness. Subsistence plus farming is not agribusiness. If we want to go into agribusiness, we have to learn that this means commercial farming, and it cannot absorb the millions of young people we are talking about. So we have to go along the lessons given South Korea, Singapore, Japan, etc. Where right now what we need Ghana, that's why I said industrial-led transformation, being progressive and targeted. Progressive because what we need right now is not AI technology businesses. We need businesses that are labor intensive. There are a huge number of these companies in Asia looking for a home. We have to accept that before you can race, you must be able to crawl and walk. And we have to accept that we have a learning process as a people in order to be able to get ourselves to that situation. The third one I want to put is what I've put here, which is it is going through, which is on my informal sector. And I've put here structured, progressive war on informality.
War on informality.
structured, progressive war on informality. We will go nowhere if 10 years down the road, 70%, 60% of our economy is still the informal sector. We're not going to do anything because it's the tail. We are going to be trying to use the tail to move the dog, where the whole body of the dog is the informal sector, and we're trying to use the tail to move it. It's not going to work. When I say structured, it's because we have to do this in a manner that is targeted. Progressive, because people's livelihood depends on it, but we have to make sure we move it. But it has to end. Informality makes it difficult to have any economic policy to affect people. It just doesn't work. You just can't get to them. And then my last point, if I can put that in there, is my 7th point. I want to put this in because I think it's so important. Training, education, and reform. Sometimes I look at some of the people we are training in our country, and I wonder if we actually train them for Ghana or for another country. I remember actually very well Mr. Yamson's father mentioning the point when he was at that time. I was at Coca-Cola at that time. He was at Unilever. The part of the challenges they had is that when they recruited people coming into the industry, they didn't know they hadn't trained them for industry. They were trained for something else. What we need now is that focus. And then let me just end up with the final point, if I may. It is going to take us, Bernard, 20 to 30 years to get to the position where we don't have to have an IMF program. So we are going to need patience. We're going to need patience and even more patience. And if we're not ready to accept that journey, we are going to be back to 18, 19, 20.
All right.
But it starts with my first point. Restructure, refocus, and reassign.
Thank you, Robert Ahunka Lindsay, who is a former Deputy Minister of Trade, a former GIPC boss, now an entrepreneur, and a member of the New Patriotic Party. And he was speaking to us from London. In studio, I had Michael Harry Yamson, who is also a former executive at Unilever and former executive at GBS, and now senior partner and COO of Ismail Yamson and Associates. Let me end with Dr. Edudu Sarkodie, the economics department. He says, we shouldn't have messed up as a country and gotten ourselves into this mess in the first place. However, we need an IMF program as a short-term solution while we work on the long-term solutions. I think Dr. Edudu Sarkodie sums it up nicely. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show. And thank you for watching. If you like this video, share it and let others see it as well. My name is Bernard Abel. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.